this morning, I want to say that we have lighted 50 candles on the communion table, one each in memory of those lives lost in New Zealand this past week. In addition, of course, to the 50 who were killed or have died, there are another 40-some-odd people still wounded and many still in critical condition. And this morning, it just so happens, without knowing, of course, that this event would take place, our topic is justice, because we are following the scripture from Micah: do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly. And it is the walk humbly part, I think, that our nation and our world is missing so much today, and it is the cause of so much violence. And we, who are people of faith, must heed this call from Micah today, I believe. And so we have lighted these candles in our presence to remember those lives lost and the violence that we abhor, and our call to do something about it. So will you pray with me? In the context of a painful world, O God, we gather, as those did on Friday, in a house of prayer, to seek your face, to listen to your voice. So tune the ears of our spirit that we may hear from you as you seek to speak to us. In the name of Christ and all holy names we pray. In the mouth of the Bible, justice is a verb, not a noun. That is, it is something that we do, not something that we have. My kids are grown now, but I remember that their most searing indictment about some decision I might have made or some action I might have taken was to yell at me, "That's not fair." Sound familiar? Something in us longs for a world that is more fair, more just, especially in its dealings with us. Of course, like my daughters, who thought a grave injustice had been done to them, most of us forget all the privileges and advantages that are automatically ours just because of where we were born, or our health, or our race, or our gender, or our economic situation. And my daughters hated it when I pointed that out. That they didn't really want to live in a world that was fair, because they already had much, much more than the overwhelming majority of the rest of the children in the world, who might very well look at them and all that they had and had not earned and say, "That's not fair. We deserve as much as you." So, in the context of that reality, you and I must ask, what does it mean for us to respond to the Bible's injunction that God requires us to do justice? I said last week in my sermon, though there were not many people here to hear it, that doing justice is altogether too tangible and specific. It makes us uncomfortable. We like our religion to be vague and general and nice platitudes, but Micah is very specific about what God requires of us, about what is good and right. You know, Micah says. And so, God, who requires us to do justice, wants it to be something specific. So let me offer you some specifics. As a church, I want to challenge First Presbyterian Church of New Canaan to seek specifically and tangibly to answer the question, what does it mean for us to do justice? And I want to just give you a couple of examples of what other Presbyterian churches do. In some churches, there is a justice team that focuses on doing education with the congregation so the congregation can educate the community. In others, the primary focus is on the environment, the implications that apparently we are a generation of people willing to destroy the planet that our grandchildren are going to need to live on. One of the churches is doing what they call an action book study about racism. I love that they're not just reading the book, but they're going to read the book and then take action. Some congregations saw their mission work as connected with doing justice in the world. That is, mission and our missionary trips and things like that were an expression of justice. And so I hope when our young people take their mission trip this summer, they'll come back and teach us about the importance of economic justice and why they did what they did. Many churches use the model that we use with our compassion work. That is, they found other organizations that were already doing justice, and they came alongside them and did it together. They partnered together. And they didn't just give their money to these organizations. They actually got involved. The challenges and opportunities to do justice are so great that many churches had to create a set of priorities and said, while there are lots of things that we can do, this is what speaks to our heart the most. And so we're going to focus our energies here, because if we don't, they become so dissipated that we have no impact. The listing of Presbyterian churches doing justice in the world could go on and on. But as I did this research, one of the things that I discovered was that doing justice is a Presbyterian value. I knew already that it was a value that many of those of us in this room also hold. So I want to propose that we find a way to enable our congregation to express those values. To stop just talking about justice, or stop just listening to me talk about justice, but to find some ways, very specific, tangible ways, that we as a community of faith can do it together. That we can make justice a verb, something we do, which is what Micah said God expected of us. So I want us to form a new justice ministry here at First Presbyterian. In the gospel lesson, some Pharisees come to Jesus to warn him to flee because Herod wanted to kill him. Have you ever thought about that now? I mean, who on earth would want to kill Jesus? Well, we can't think about that because we think of Jesus as a sweet, meek, and mild teacher that we learned about in Sunday school. But you know, sweet, meek, and mild Sunday school teachers rarely ever get executed. Herod wanted to kill Jesus because he was challenging the status quo. He was confronting oppression, especially oppression against the poor. At the very end of his life, the religious leaders finally turned against him when he threw the money changers out of the temple. I mean, they objected to what he'd been teaching all along. They disagreed with it. But it was when he started messing with their for-profit spirituality that he had to go. Jesus got into trouble when he started doing justice rather than just talking about justice. He wanted to gather people together like a mother hen, but they would have none of it. One of the most extraordinary contemporary prophets of our day, it may be someone that you do not know. The Reverend Dr. William Barber was the pastor of a Disciples of Christ church in a small town in North Carolina. ironically, the small town where my partner grew up. Then, several years ago, the state of North Carolina started to act in repressive ways. And Reverend Barber came out of his small town and started a movement called Moral Mondays. And under his leadership, thousands of people began to show up on Mondays at the state capitol. And many of my dearest colleagues were arrested there several times. Reverend Barber is now leading a second Poor People's March to draw attention to economic inequality. He joined Isaiah in calling people of faith to become repairers of the breach. So, what does Isaiah mean by that phrase? And why did Reverend Barber adopt it? And more importantly, what does it say to us? How do we do it? Well, the word breach means an opening made by breaking down something solid. A gap, alienation, estrangement. It means a call to take the place of something missing. Breaking, helping someone keep from breaking a promise. You see, Jerusalem was a walled city. And at the time of Isaiah, they had many enemies. They were surrounded, in fact, by enemies. And so the image of a breach in that wall struck terror in the heart of the residents. God was calling, is calling people to become heroes who stand in that gap, protecting vulnerable people. God is calling people today to be that kind of hero. So today, I call you and I to stand in the gap. This is what it means for us to be a church committed to doing justice, loving mercifully, and walking humbly with God. Something God has shown you is required of you. It's what it looks like to be a good person. Do justice. I'll admit that given all that is going on in our world, I don't even know where to start. I just know we must start. It must start with us. And it must start now. We who are people of faith must take responsibility for repairing the gaps in our society. Gaps between justice and inequality. Gaps between power and peace. Gaps between prophets and people. Gaps between exploitation and caring for creation. I know many people, especially in the South, do not believe that churches should be involved in justice work. Much of that feeling is rooted in the 1960s, when churches resisted getting involved in the civil rights movement, and so they said, well, that's politics and we do religion. That separation kept us from doing justice in many places. But I believe that we as a people are called to take a stand. I believe that we as a people are called not to get involved in partisan politics particularly. God knows there's enough blame to go around. Some days I want to pronounce a pox on both their houses. But the Bible is clear. Justice is not politics. It is not political. It may impact politics, but justice is a moral issue, especially for people who follow Jesus. Jesus called us to be the salt of the earth, the light of the world, and it is time for us to get out of our salt shakers and turn up that light on the darkness. African American churches have a long and powerful history of doing justice in the world. Can't we do it too? Can't we follow their model? Can't we learn from someone else for a change? Perhaps this is why we have been called to follow Jesus for such a time as this. One of the prophets that Dr. King was fond of quoting so often, in fact, that the quote he uses got attributed to him. It was really the prophet Amos who said it, but Dr. King got the credit for calling for justice to roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. I've been thinking about this illustration in Amos and what it means. You see, these great waters, they all begin as a single drop. When one drop joins to another, and then another, and another, until a trickle becomes a stream, and a stream becomes a river, and the river becomes the mighty ocean. No, we can't do this by ourselves. We cannot do this alone. But we can join the river of God's righteousness. We can, together, make a difference. No single act of justice will do much. Writing letters, sending emails, volunteering, speaking up, giving generously, none of that alone will change the world. But please hear me. The world will never change until each of us and all of us do more justice. Join together and do more justice. Edmund Burke was who said, all that is required for evil to prevail is for good souls to do nothing. But the opposite of that is true as well. All that is required for justice to prevail is for good souls to do something. Let me leave you with the words of one of our most effective modern prophets today.
I hear Jesus saying to every nation, even in America, I don't care how big your military is. I don't care how big your banking industry is. When I decide to judge this world, I'm going to ask them questions. When I was hungry, did you feed me? When I was naked, did you clothe me? When I was in prison, did you visit me? When I was sick, did you heal me? And this is true evangelicalism, and anything else is theological malpractice. If you believed in love on Monday, you ought to still believe in love today. Your principles did not die. They were not unelected. And we must make America what it must be. There's still a creator spoken of in the scriptures that guarantees us inalienable rights. To those who want to hate, don't do it, because love and truth are more powerful and more redemptive. This is not the time for the politics and playing games with the lives of the most vulnerable. This is a time for statesmen and stateswomen, not merely partisan politics. And to the children, be better than what you've seen this year. Don't be racist. Don't be bullies. Don't be haters, because you are our now and our future. And to the faithful, like Samuel, we cannot mourn forever. We must still be the prophets to this nation, and we must challenge this nation until the day comes that we are one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We are the ones we have been waiting for. It's an old African truth. It is a commission that we must fulfill as people of faith. And perhaps we are the only ones who can fulfill it, because you see, we are the keepers of the hope that the world can be better. Those who follow the way of Jesus know that hopelessness and despair is an attitude only atheists are allowed. We are called believers. Life isn't fair. But together, maybe we can make it a little more just.